Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I begin, I'd like to declare my interest as the Chairman of the Aljunied Hougang Town Council. Madam Speaker, this amendment bill does not seek to review the original objectives of the Town Councils Act. That is not on the government's agenda. We are debating this bill with a view to improve the existing Act. I do not oppose that objective per se, but as an opposition MP, my experience is that town councils operate quite differently by design in PAP and opposition wards, and as such are inevitably judged by different yardsticks. The Workers' Party does not oppose raising governance standards for town councils, but we have a specific concern over the new Part 6A of the bill, which gives intrusive oversight powers to the Ministry of National Development, directed by political office holders of any incumbent government, not just the PAP. We believe an independent entity or inspectors not appointed by the government should resolve disputes if and when they occur between MND and the affected town council, a point Ms. Sylvia Lim will build upon. Let me reiterate, the additional scrutiny on town councils is not objectionable. It is the identity of the scrutinizer that warrants scrutiny. According to then Deputy Prime Minister Goh, there were two philosophical objectives behind the original Town Council's bill. Firstly, it purported to transfer some power from the HDB to the MPs and grassroots leaders. It gives the MPs and residents greater power and responsibility to manage their own affairs and to participate in their estate's development. Secondly, because MPs will have increased authority and responsibility, voters will be more likely to vote carefully and sincerely to choose honest and effective MPs. However, the transfer of power from the HDB to the MPs, and I stress grassroots leaders, is only partial in an opposition town council, as the grassroots are by design not part of the opposition town council's firmament. This is because the government cannot reconcile that an opposition MP and by extension an opposition town council would support the government's plans. It is also instructive that nowhere does the word grassroots, CIPC or the People's Association appear in the Town Councils Act. Yet, the grassroots were acknowledged as a conspicuous and central part of the Town Council system when the bill was debated in 1988. This is because the Town Council Act was legislated to serve a dominant one-party state, and to that end, government-sanctioned grassroots organizations do not work with the elected MPs in opposition town councils. This remains a fundamental omission vis-à-vis the operation of town councils in opposition wards. I have spoken on how the grassroots have a significant say on estate upgrading via CIPC funding in this House previously, and I will not repeat those points here. The same can be said about the political control of critical town council management systems and software by politically influenced entities. One can just compare the amount of state resources extended via the CIPC committee through the grassroots in PAP town councils compared to opposition town councils. Certainly, lesser taxpayer funds to opposition town councils will inevitably lower the esteem of opposition-run town councils with attendant political ramifications. While I believe this should change and a fairer system ought to take form, as a political realist, I can see why the ruling party would rather institutionalize the status quo. In view of some fundamental disparities between opposition and PAP town councils in practice, the Workers' Party will approach this amendment bill with the words of the then Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. S. Dhanabalan, in his roundup speech on the original town council's bill some 30 years ago. He said, and I quote, "The question really is not whether or not there is a political purpose. The question is the purpose a good one for Singapore? Will it make for a better Singapore? Will it make for a more stable and secure Singapore? Will it make for a better life for our citizens?" That is the question we ought to ask. I would like to state for the record that the Workers' Party is under no illusion that the purpose of the Town Councils Act is undeniably political, and since 1988, PAP politicians have come out openly to say so. So that point has been settled. But the former DPM's subsequent questions remain relevant today. To that end, the Workers' Party does not oppose 5 of the 6 amendments proposed in the explanatory statement to the Act, namely to promote and strengthen effective and efficient governance and accountability of town councils, to foster a culture of personal integrity and accountability for administrative officials of the town council, to ensure sound financial management, promote better governance, and to clarify the role of town councils in emergency planning. However, the introduction of oversight mechanisms and monitoring powers over the town councils that are in the hands of the government has the potential for abuse. This would not necessarily ensure good outcomes for Singapore, but rather politically good outcomes for any ruling party. Central to the working of the town councils is the powers of the elected MPs in relation to the MND. Critical to the success of the town councils is the protection of the MPs' autonomy, guaranteed as a political space for the MPs to work with local residents so that the same residents voting in the general election can judge the MPs' performance. If we return to the speech of then Deputy Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong during the 1988 debate, he raised three important points. First, it was not the original intention that HDB become the management corporation, the management corporation for 80% of the population. Such an over-centralization is undesirable. Second, when our people become too dependent on the HDB, they will lose self-reliance and responsibility for their own surroundings. In a sense, they will expect HDB to fix and do everything. Third, as such, to preserve the political autonomy of the MPs and self-reliance of the people, HDB should only intervene when there are hazards to public health, public safety and public order. In principle, Clause 24 of the bill is problematic on these 3 points by reversing and diminishing the political autonomy of the elected MPs in relation to MND, which oversees HDB. If citizens know that MND will intervene when the town is not run effectively, then whether the candidates standing for elections are honest and effective enough to run a TC potentially becomes irrelevant. As envisaged by the Town Councils Act originally, voters are responsible for the MPs they choose to run their towns and represent them in Parliament. If they do not like what they see, they can vote underperforming MPs out at the next elections. MND having oversight over the Town Council does not mean just over-centralization potentially, but it also leads to two political perversions. First, it risks politicization of the public service, where MND risks becoming a tool of the ruling party of the day to fix the opposition. Second, it causes the elected MPs to answer to the unelected bureaucracy, subordinating the elected mandate of MPs to the executive branch. I would suggest to this House that there is a better way to move forward on this point while retaining the proposed oversight powers sought by this bill that will at the same time preserve the central feature of town councils, the political autonomy of MPs. Those oversight powers should be in the hands of independent parties, not linked to the ministry or the government in general. This is critical to preserving the town councils as a ballast to our democracy, and I would take the point made by the Honourable Member Mr. Teo Ho Pin about the potential of introducing an independent auditor during the time when an estate is handed over, especially between political parties. I think that concept should be pursued. To conclude, Madam Speaker, as late as 2009, a Straits Times report quoting the then Senior Minister Goh noted that in spite of the Town Council's existence, residents did not seem to take a greater interest in the estates they lived in. It was noteworthy that one public poll commissioned by the Straits Times in 2013 found that close to 80% of those polled wished to have the HDB replace town councils in the provision of services to residents. In fact, the same call was made more recently in the public consultation to this bill. It would be helpful if the government looked into why many Singaporeans are not, or at least the polled Singaporeans are not as enthusiastic about town councils in spite of its objectives, not all of which are necessarily objectionable. I do think there is much value in getting MPs involved in local politics and the nitty-gritty of constituency work. In spite of the different realities on the ground in the treatment between opposition and PAP town councils, particularly as a result of the grassroots and by extension losing PAP political candidates through the People's Association, the Workers' Party is determined to make the best of a less than equitable situation, managing it not with the cards we wished we had, but those that are in our hands. Thank you.
Madam, may I ask the honourable members, for the purpose of me giving a fuller reply to his points later, two clarifications. One is with respect to your proposal for an independent person to exercise the powers under Part 6A. You were relying on what Mr. Teo Ho Pin had mentioned, an independent auditor. Can you explain what your proposal is so that we have a better understanding? And secondly, you referred to a 2009 ST report as well as subsequent poll where you, as I quote you, 80% of people polled wanted the HDB to take back estate management. But that is what the poll says. But can I understand in this House what is your position and what's the position of the Workers' Party in respect of the position of town councils in our elected system? Thank you.
I'll take the second question first. The 2013 poll, I think 50 people, and 41 of them said, 2013, I beg your pardon. 2013 poll said that 41 out of 50. But to clarify, as I mentioned in my speech, there is value in having MPs run town councils. So that position remains. It's not the position that the polls suggest, but what the polls are telling us is that the public may have a different view about it. And that's something for the MND to consider. Your first question was with regard to the inspectors who under Clause 24 could come into a town council. And I would suggest that the provision that the Town Council Act currently provides for, which is for an independent agent to potentially look into issues with which the MND feel the Town Council ought to, is potentially sufficient. Because it is working in the current context, as the Senior Minister of State would know in the case of the Aljunied Hougang Town Council. So I think the key point is, if there's an independent individual, I think that would be a better position or better outcome for Singaporeans.
SMS, Desmond.
I thank the member for his clarification. On the second point, you say that if the auditor or the inspector is an independent inspector, you would support Clause 6A. If I were to explain to you that Part 6A allows for the MND to appoint independent auditors who would then conduct compliance reviews or investigations, and who are then required by the legislation to report both to MND and the Town Council, would that change your position and your parties?
SMS, I would suggest that it would, provided you could provide us more details on how those independent investigators would be appointed. There is potential to review the position.
Madam, I have clarifications for the member.
Yes, Mr. You have clarifications? Or
I have.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, I would start off with my clarifications before Mr. Singh does. Clarification for Mr. Zainal Sapari. He was going on about the handover of Punggol East and saying that Pasir Ris Punggol Town Council had a lot of operational problems and so on. But I'm quite surprised to hear that, because does he not, or can he not confirm that AHTC and PRPTC have actually met many times for the handover, and has he ever raised these problems?
Ms. Lim, can you please address your comments to me?
Yes, sorry, madam. That was the first clarification. Second clarification, he talked about late transfer of sinking funds, and his observation was that it could only mean that there has been some, we've overspent on routine funds and so on. But does he not agree that if a town council is deprived of government grants, that could also be a reason why it may not be able to make timely sinking fund transfer? And the third point is, he quoted a professor talking about the KPMG past payment review, where the professor mentioned that there could be some criminal liability involved. I'd like to ask Mr. Sapari whether he has actually read the report and whether there is any finding of criminal intent.
Okay, Madam, let me answer the clarification sought by Ms. Sylvia Lim. I think on the issue whether we have met several times to resolve some of these operational issues, yes, I think we have met several times. But during many of these meetings, while there's assurance of cooperation, but our town council faced a lot of challenges. For example, data were provided in the PDF format instead in the format that we could actually use. We also not given the information that we require in a timely manner, and this all affected our ability to be able to serve our residents. On the second point, with regards to the late transfer of sinking funds, I did not make any specific reference to any town council. I just say that if a town council is late in the transfer of sinking funds, it could imply the two things which I had mentioned in the speech. And I also like to state, looking at the records of AHTC, the transfer of sinking funds were late even before government transfers were being withheld. And then on the third point about the quote that I cited about from the Professor Alfred Bu of criminal liability. I have read actually the report by KPMG as to whether there is a criminal liability. It is not for me to establish whether there's any criminal intent.
Ms. Sylvia Lim?
I'd like to clarify with the member about his reading of the KPMG report. My question is very simple, whether there was any finding that there is criminal intent.
Madam Speaker, as I have mentioned, whether there is any finding of criminal intent is for other government agencies to establish so.
Mr. Pritam Singh?
Can I just ask Mr. Zainal Sapari, Ms. Sylvia Lim asked him a question when there were these alleged difficulties that he mentioned at the operational level. Did he write to at least the chairman and myself or the vice chairman of the town council what those problems were so that we could help him resolve them? Because my understanding was we've actually tried to work as best as we can in the circumstances that we're in to ensure a smooth handover. With regard to the earlier comment made about some delay in handover of financial statements, 8.5 months and so forth, can I just ask the member, Mr. Zainal Sapari, when Pongoli's SMC was transferred to then AHPTC after the 2013 elections, when was the last installment of sinking funds made by PRPTC to AHTC? And how does that compare with the final installment that was made to PRPTC, as has been reported in the media today, I believe?
With regards to the first clarification, whether we had engaged the chairman of the town council, I think these are all done by the secretariat, by the town council staff, to actually work directly with the staff from AHTC. What were shared with me were information that was told to me by my staff. On the second point, with regards to this transfer, I think we did explain. We did make the first transfer of 10 million within 3 months of the handover, and the subsequent amount were eventually transferred to HTC after we have resolved all the accounts.
Mr. Pritam Singh?
With regard to the reply to the first question, I think the point remains that it was open to Mr. Zainal Sapari to write to me, and he chose not to. On the second point, I believe the final transfer by PRPTC to but the final transfer of the sinking funds or the outstanding funds to AHTC was made in September 2014, some 1.5 years after the by-election in Pongoli's SMC. I believe the deadline is not too different from the final transfer, the final installment made by AHTC to PRPTC.
Madam Speaker, with regards to the second clarification, I think the thrust of my speech was not with regards to the amount that is being transferred, really to the operational difficulties that PRPG TC faced when we were unable to get complete information, or information that was given to us was after some time have actually lapsed.
Mr. Pong Eng Huat? Mr. Loh Tia Kiang?
Madam, the member chosen to repeat the allegation made by the NTU professor. I'll ask him what is his view. He has read the report. That's what he said. Was there a finding in the report there was criminal intent? That's question number one. Number two, since he has read the report, so if there's no finding, what is his view?
Madam Speaker, with regards to the first clarification by Mr. Lau Tia Kiang, Whether there is a criminal intent based on the report, it is not for me to establish it. And with regards to the second question, what is my view? I think that is the whole purpose of having this amendment, is to make sure that we improve on our financial governance.
Can I advise members to address the chair and not to talk to each other? Mr. Peng Eng Huat.
Thank you, Madam. I just want to ask the member, this is the first time I'm hearing that the data transfer and all this were having a lot of problems. Some of them are in PDF. We actually engaged the same contractor that did the transfer from Potong Pasir Town Council to the PAP Town Council. It's the same contractor and there's no issue raised. So actually along the way we keep asking the contractor any issue raised, major issues. There were no issue raised. So this is the first time we are hearing this. So maybe the member can explain what are these issues with the data transfer.
Madam Speaker, during the meeting, all the issues that we raised are on the record. I do not have the records now. We could always share later on with AHTC if they so desire what was some of the information that was given to us, and it wasn't complete for us to be operational ready.